What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's going on with the overall market so far, what the technicals are suggesting, what the news is saying about Tesla, and what you should be watching for when it comes to data, once again coming out for tomorrow. But before I break anything down, all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. This offer ends in just 5 hours, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the market. Looking at Tesla, we had a pretty decent day today. We saw Tesla pop very nicely in the morning. Well, actually, we dropped first and then we popped very nicely. Then after that, Tesla came down, started to downtrend as the day went on, trading sideways. And still, it ended up closing in a manner that was stronger than that of most stocks out there. It has some strength associated with it, but at the same time, the market is starting to show more signals that are suggesting that there could be downside coming, and this downside could have an effect on Tesla. So I want to break this down over the next couple of minutes. Let's first talk about the markets and what's going on with earnings. For earnings for tomorrow, don't forget we have Alibaba, we have Walmart, Macy's, many other retail stores, not to mention like Ross, and it's going to be very important for those who are interested. And I'll be watching many of these as time goes on, especially Walmart's, which is going to give us more views about their guidance and stuff like that. Moving forward, for data for tomorrow, we have Cook and Barr from the Fed giving some speeches. Then we have initial jobless claims an hour before the market opens. So 1 hour before open, we're going to find out what happens with all of these jobs numbers and how this affects the Fed's policies. After that, we have some industrial production data around 9:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have the bill auction at 11:30 a.m. And then around noon, we have more Fed speakers and the mortgage rate. So everything's very minor. None of the data is that crazy except for initial jobless claims. This could move the market, so we'll be watching for that very carefully. I'm recording this video during the after hours, just a couple of hours after the market has closed. And right now, the market's in a very interesting state. So right now, I think this was just updated a couple of minutes ago. The market is on neutral mode. We're getting very close to greed. The question is, will we reach greed, or is the market about to turn right before we do so? And this is going to be very interesting for the next couple of days. Other indicators are still kind of greedy, such as market momentum, whereas when you look at the puts and call options, they just barely turned greedy. And this could change how things are viewed very, very soon. This could affect the markets. We're going to be waiting to see how this ends up changing. Now, moving forward on a seasonality basis, guys, my view of the market is simple. I am bullish for the end of the year, even for Tesla and the different tickers. However, just because I'm bullish for December, just because I think we're going to end the year most likely on a very strong note, so long as there's no like government shutdown and things like that, as long as that view stays with me, that doesn't necessarily change my view of November. However, I still think we could get a very healthy pullback in November. It's going to be very healthy, very normal. And I think that we could be very close to it if certain things happen, which I will discuss in the next couple of minutes. On a seasonality basis, we tend to see the market cool off a bit during the middle of November, but I still think that the seasonality will be correct for December, and we're going to see more upside at the very end of the year. But for now, we're still in the middle of November. We're not at December yet, and I think the market could get a very healthy pullback very, very soon. For Tesla, we have some new pieces of news coming out. I mean, look at the model inventory levels. Things are looking quite decent. We're seeing a lot of buyers still coming in for the Teslas, and the inventories are still kind of low. They tend to drop a bit towards the ends of the year. We're hoping that we see more of these drop as we hit December, as demand starts to go up for the end of the year sales, especially during Christmas time. As far as Tesla goes, some news came out that Tesla faces pressure in Sweden as workers are basically at a particular supplier are on strike again. And this is once again because of the fact that there's some contractions with the different collective bargaining statements and efforts that are going on over there. They're demanding more things from Tesla, more benefits for employees, higher pay, and things like that. So far, Tesla hasn't responded from what I found. We'll be waiting to see if this continues over time. This isn't anything that's way too serious because Sweden is not where they have like massive gigafactories or anything like this. They just have lots of mechanics and lots of repair centers over there. So we'll be watching to see what happens as time goes on. This is still making the headlines and the news. There's also some news about how a critical supplier of Tesla has gotten snatched pushed up by GM. And this is very important because this is known as TEI. It was acquired by GM. And this is a very important for Tesla's bigger cast parts. With this happening, it just shows the control that GM is trying to gain, and it's trying to dip its toes in the EV space as a result of this. So it's very interesting to see this happening. I don't think this is going to negatively affect Tesla as of right now. This should just be fine for them. But I just want to note this news. This could cause some changes maybe in the future, but I'm not seeing anything too huge as of right now. Moving forward for Tesla, from a technical standpoint, volume was at 150 million. We're seeing more buyers stepping in, and they're continuing to defend Tesla quite nicely. As a result of that buying, we're seeing the short volume starting to go up just a little bit. We're starting to see more of the volume being made up of shorting, and shorting is starting to increase on Tesla. On top of this, HSBC reduced their overall rating on Tesla in the past. This happened just a couple of, I think this was the last week. And since then, I haven't seen anything else from different analysts. The price price ratio is going up because Tesla is gaining some relative strength. Tesla is becoming stronger than the market and outperforming. And the price price ratio is suggesting that Tesla could even outperform the markets tomorrow. But we'll have to see how it responds to what's about to happen. The daily seasonality suggests that on Thursdays, it tends to be one of Tesla's weakest days. We're only green 47.8% of the time. We tend to see more volatility around 11 o'clock a.m. and also at 2 o'clock p.m. for Tesla. So if you want to be watching it, and that's in Eastern Standard Time, by the way. And finally, don't forget that November tends to be a strong month at the very end. We could see some pulling back in the markets temporarily, but we could still end at November strong, and we should be able to stop and end December even more strong, even stronger than that. So we'll be waiting to see December. We're getting very close to it. It's very exciting. Financial estimates are still good for Tesla based off this information. So now looking at Tesla, as I've said in the past, the market's moving based off algorithms, and these algorithms affect different stocks such as Tesla. The market popped and started to sell off as time went on. That's similar to what Tesla did. You guys can see it popped and sold off. But something very interesting is happening to SPY and the QQQ, and this could have a correlation with that of Tesla. And I want to call this out. So we're starting to get some sell signals for the markets. They haven't fully developed yet, but they are giving us some signals that they may develop soon. And what are some of these signals? So let's first start off with the daily chart on SPY. And by the way, guys, sorry if I'm going kind of fast. There's just so much I have to talk about. First off, on the daily charts of SPY, you guys are going to notice that when we hit the upper Bollinger Band on the daily time frame, we tend to reject, just like this instance right here in July. SPY went from 456 all the way down to about 450 in just a couple of days after rejecting. We pushed up higher another day, going to 459, and then we came all the way back down the next day towards like 452 before bouncing and then selling off. Another instance when we hit the upper Bollinger Band on the daily time frame, SPY rejected right here. There's another instance in October where we came very close to it. SPY went from 438, and then a couple of days later just sold off pretty hard after coming close to the upper Bollinger Band. So what does all of this mean? In my opinion, this suggests that once we hit that upper Bollinger, we tend to see sellers stepping in, and we tend to get some tight resistance, and we tend to see a big shift in market structure. What just happened today? We slammed into the upper Bollinger, and we rejected off of it, and we might see some selling. We have a potential reversal sequence developing. And on top of all of that, we have more potential sell signals developing. So the daily time frame is suggesting that there could be a reversal. We have a big gap below SPY on the daily. And then on top of that, with this big gap, if we do end up breaking down to fill it, this could lead to selling. On top of this, you will notice that the 4-hour time frame is getting very close to a bearish cross in the PPO. We're selling off in the after hours, which is another signal. And on the 30 minutes, the 5 minutes, or the hourly time frames, whichever one you want to use, we have a nice looking head and shoulders like structures developing on SPY. And we have a double, I think it's a double bearish divergence that's also looking like it might play out. Now, bearish divergences don't always play out, but they do tend to play out the majority of the time. So that's just one signal accompanied by other signals from the daily Bollinger Band rejection to the daily reversal sequence, the gap down below us, and the head and shoulders on SPY are all suggesting that the market may pull back a bit very soon. But just to be safe, let me just make this clear. My view could change depending on intraday price action and news. If we get a big pump and SPY breaks 452, I'm going to turn bullish because on the daily time frame, just to be clear, If we break that resistance, we could push up to 453.5. Then we have like 456 and 457. That's only if we break 452. But as of right now, there are more compelling arguments that suggest there's going to be downside. The arguments for the downside are a little stronger than the arguments for the upside. And I think that all these different signals are forming these confluences that suggest there might be some downside coming soon, with the head and shoulders that's forming, the bearish divergences, the rejection of the daily Bollinger Band, the reversal sequence, and all these different factors. Also, when you look at the 30 minutes time frame or even the hourly, I think the hourly could work just as well. You will see that Tesla also has a head and shoulders like pattern with the bearish divergence, which suggests that there could be some downside. Hourly is getting kind of weaker, but we'll have to see on Tesla. The same thing could be said about a couple of other tickers. So Aapl pumped. It reached 190, which is where we have tight resistance. We rejected, and we have like a head and shoulders like pattern on Aapl that's developing, which could lead to some selling. The 4-hour time frame is also looking a bit weaker on this, which suggests the same thing. We have a bearish divergence on Appl's 4-hour time frame after we hit that resistance. The QQQ has a potential bearish crossover on the PPO developing. We pumped and then we started dropping today, even though we just barely closed green. It's because we popped after the PPI news came out before we started to sell off a bit. So we have a head and shoulders like pattern, on the 4-hour time frame. On the 1 hour and the 30 minutes time frames, the same thing is developing a head and shoulders like pattern. Nvidia also came down quite a bit. This thing rejected off 500. I said yesterday this thing might test 500. If we break 500, push above it, we're bullish. If you reject off of it, expect some bearish price action. What happened? We rejected off 500 and Nvidia started to sell off. And if Nvidia continues to sell off, it's going to be even more bearish, leading SPY, the QQQ, the NASDAQ, and other indices and such down. So what does all of this mean? What do I see for the markets? Here's my very, very simple answer. We're going to be watching the levels to give us confirmation of what's about to happen. And by looking at the different levels, that's going to help us understand what could end up panning out. So if SPY manages to break 452, I'm going to turn bullish. We could push for 453, then 456. If we end up breaking below 447, we're going to start sinking down to 445 and lower levels than that. What is more likely? The answer is because we have all these bearish looking confluences, the head and shoulders on on the QQQ and etc. All the things I just showed you, right? And it's also right before the fear and greed index became greedy. With the bearish divergence in the head and shoulders, I think the odds favor more downside, and I think we might see SPY retest at least 447 or below that going into tomorrow. The market's also due for a pullback after pumping so much so fast. I mean, if you look at like the 4-hour time frame, the RSI is still at 73. It's still kind of overbought. So once again, guys, I think the odds favor the downside, but just to be safe, watch the levels and see which levels break for confirmation. Don't turn way too bearish solely based off what I just said. Also look for confirmation in the price action. On the QQQ, we have a head and shoulders like pattern. We also had the other signals I mentioned. If we're bullish, you want to see it get above 388. If we're bearish, you want to see it lose 382. If it loses that, it could fall towards 380. In my opinion, the odds favor this head and shoulders playing out and this thing testing 382 and potentially coming down. That seems more probable, but just to be safe, make sure you watch the levels. On Tesla stock, Tesla's a little mixed right now. It's very flat, but it's showing some weakness off this head and shoulders like pattern. If we break 247, anticipate it's going to be bullish for 250, and that's where we have some tight resistance. If we're bearish, you want to see it lose 240 and then 238, and it's going to be sinking towards the 235s or below that. In my opinion, Tesla's looking a bit more bearish as we have this head and shoulders like structure, and we're starting to turn on the bigger time frames. If you look at Tesla on the 4-hour time frame, you can see that it's getting tighter on the PPO, losing some momentum. On the daily time frame, it's looking quite decent, so there's no signal of Tesla breaking down yet. So that's why you want to watch the levels. My concern for Tesla is because SPY, the QQQ, these other algorithms may shift and they could lead to selling. It could have a big effect on Tesla. There's a risk of that happening, so make sure you watch the charts very carefully, and we will see how it goes. So in my opinion, once again, there's a bullish and bearish case. My gut's telling me it might pop in the morning, as it typically does, retest like 245 and be a little bit below that, and then start selling off thanks to the head and shoulders and make its way back down into the 230s, maybe retesting 235 or below that very, very soon. So I'm leaning a bit more in that direction for Tesla. I also want to call out that on Tesla's 1-hour time frame, we have a bearish divergence that has developed. These don't always play out, like I've said before, but most of the time they do. And we have other signals suggesting something similar. The 4-hour is showing that Tesla's losing some momentum. It also has a bearish divergence on the 4-hour, which suggests that it might come down towards the lower levels. So we'll be watching this very carefully. To add on to this, looking at Apple stock, I want to call out Apple because Apple made an attempt to go higher, and we have some very strong resistance at 190. Historically, the last time we hit 190, this thing rejected pretty hard off of this a couple of months ago. So if we go back on the chart, you could see that back in August, very end of August, we hit 190 and rejected, and we're very close to that level right now. So I'm thinking Apple could, if you're bullish, you want to see it break 189, try to get up to 190, then reject, or it could just reject from here off this bearish looking structure. We're starting to break a little bit below this channel that formed. And if we kind of get a back test around like 188.5 and reject, that's going to turn bearish. If we're bearish, you want to see it lose 187.5. If we lose it, look for the gap fill in the lower 187s, and then the 185s could be coming. The odds do favor some downside. For Nvda stock, this is going to be very interesting. Okay, this stock, in my opinion, is looking a bit more bearish. So we had this, wedge that formed, which led to this big push during the pre-market, and then as soon as we opened, we sold off. So now on Nvidia, because it sold off so hard, we might see it rebound a bit towards like 490 or so, maybe even 492, and then reject off this wick. We might see a little rebound before it continues lower. But the thing about Nvidia is that we're seeing this thing losing strength. It's trying to underperform compared to the markets, and it's due for a slight pullback after how much of a monstrous run it had. The 4-hour is looking a bit more bearish. The daily time frame is also looking a bit more bearish. This suggests to me that we might see this thing retest these lower levels. If we continue to break below 485, I think that this thing could retest 480 to 478. If that fails us, 475 is on the table. But there's going to be a risk of some downside. I know, it's not always a promise, but we have some tight resistance at 500 and we've rejected so far. I will turn bullish on Nvidia if it gets above 500 and breaks that. As of right now, it hasn't done that. It rejected, and so that's why the odds favor the downside. All right, guys, so those are the main 5 I tend to talk about. Now I'm just going to be very fast to talk about the last few. For SoFi, we have a bearish-looking daily doji that's forming, and this suggests that we might see some downside towards 7.04 to fill this gap. That's the more bearish case. To be bullish, you want to break the 200 EMA at 7.59. In my opinion, the odds favor the downside scenario. Looking at the IWM, we got a rejection off the 200 EMA. The Russell 2000 might come down towards 173.6. If we lose this, watch the gap fill down here towards 168. I think the odds favor some downside. In order to be bullish, you want to see it close above the 200 EMA. As of right now, it came short, so there's going to be a risk of some downside. The 4-hour time frame is also looking a bit more bearish. We have a head and shoulders like pattern that suggests that we might be coming back down to the lower 170s. On Microsoft stock, we have a head and shoulders like pattern that's developing. We might see this alongside the bearish divergence play out. So we might kind of like range trade here for a bit before it sells off towards 365. I think that it might retest 365. So it might pop first towards 371, then reject and come down to 365. The odds favor that looking at the current trend. On AMD, the 4-hour time frame is looking a bit more bearish. We have a bearish divergence. It might pop a little bit, retest 119, then reject and start sinking towards 114. I think this imbalance right here might fill, and I think it's going to come down to 114 very, very soon. On Netflix, I know a lot of people like to look at Netflix stock. We have a bearish looking divergence right here. It's trying to push up. But I just want to mention that there's not really much of a sell signal yet. It's looking like it might outperform the market a bit. So it could pop a little bit more towards like 465 to 463 and then reject and come back down towards 457. So a little pop and drop looks very probable. The VIX is trying to base at 14. If you guys notice, it's trying to hold up nicely as a bullish divergence. We also have this imbalance to fill towards 14.8. It looks like it might bounce very soon. The 4-hour is also giving us a bullish divergence, which suggests the VIX might bounce more because the market might sell off a bit. Same thing on the SQQQ. We have a nice bullish divergence, a potential bullish crossover on the 4-hour time frame for the PPO, and we have this imbalance to fill around 17.3, which suggests that there could be some upside for the SQQQ and downside for the market. For the QQQ, on the SQQQ, we have an inverse head and shoulders, which suggests it might start pushing up a bit, which might B, because of the QQQ selling off and the NASDAQ selling off. The dollar also has a bullish divergence forming. It's trying to push up higher. We have this imbalance around 105.6. If we fill the imbalance, we're going to turn bullish on the dollar, which could be bearish for the markets. Coinbase popped quite a bit, holding up quite nicely, but the issue is we have a bearish divergence on the 4-hour time frame, and we failed to break 100. If we break and hold 100, we could be pushing up for 102 plus. If we reject off 100, we're going to be sinking back down towards 97. Then we have 95 that could be coming below that. My guts tells me it's going to reject and come down to 95, so we'll just wait and see. On Google, we're going to be watching to see how this thing ends up looking. This is looking neutral to me. It's not too bearish, not too bullish. We have an unfilled gap around like 139 to 140. If it breaks 137.5, watch for 140 almost to be tested before it rejects, or it could reject here with the markets because the 4-hour is curling. If it loses 135 or bearish, it's going to come down to 133. If it breaks 137.5, it could get one last pop before the rejection. Okay, so watch those levels on Google. I'm neutral on Google. For the 10-year Treasury yield, we have a bullish divergence. If this starts pushing up to fill this gap around 47.89, that could lead to the market selling off. We also have the auction data coming out that could slow the markets down. On Amazon, I think that this is looking a bit more bearish. We have a bearish divergence, and we have a head and shoulders like pattern. It might rebound towards 144, then reject and start selling off towards 141 and then 139. So look for a little pop and drop. I think that that's very probable for Amazon. For Meta, we have a bearish divergence as well, and we're going to be watching 330. If we lose 330, it's going to come down towards 323. We have a head and shoulders like pattern as well, which suggests there could be downside. The 4-hour is turning a bit more bearish, so there is a risk of downside. All right, guys, hopefully this video was not too extreme. I know I went over a lot of stuff in a very short period of time. Thank you all so much for listening. Have a great day. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning for the next video, and make sure you watch your signals and don't turn too bullish or bearish. Just look at confirmation based off levels. Okay, let the levels in the chart tell you what's about to happen. Just know there's a risk of downside looking at the current patterns and signals in the markets. All right, that's a completely different thing. All right, so that's what I have for this one. Have a great night. Enjoy your evening or wherever you are in the world. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Tesla and the market to the moon because the long term is still very bright, and peace out.